This is Nashville, Tennessee, one of the hottest recording, music, and entertainment centers in America today. Every year, thousands of people from the upper Midwest, from across the country, from all over the world, come here to try to make it in the music industry. Once here, they lay bare their hopes and their dreams and their talents. They come with guitars on their shoulders, a song on their tongues, lyrics stuffed in their pockets, and their life savings on the line.
It's been a too long time with no peace of mind.
The lure of Crystal Gayle-style success is strong. Primetime TV specials, chart-smashing hit records, royalties, applause, national celebrity status.
Why have you left the one you left me for? Has she heard like me that slamming door?
It's the dream of nearly every singer. And this is where some of the dreams come true. This is Music Row, as the natives call it, the heart of the recording industry here in Nashville. Along this 3-block stretch on Music Square West, for example, I've counted 12 sound studios, record companies, and publishing houses. And that's only a small part of the $4 billion music industry here in Nashville. Those Nashville cats you've heard about make the rounds here, lugging sheets of music and demo tapes to publishers and record producers. Country is the musical game and the fashion of many in Nashville. There is a down-home, natural feel that seems to fit, even in the crannies of an international music power. Music Row is a mixture of stately old southern homes that have been converted to record-making. And only blocks away, a glittery United Artists Tower with CBS Records, its neighbor across the street. This is the vehicle to success, a Nashville recording session. Randy Matthews and his gospel rock group Crossfire recording their first album for Spirit Records of California. Like most records, this one is being paid for by the company. The artists lend their talents, the company pays for the studio and pressing the record. That's the way most records are produced and paid for. But there is a small offshoot of mainstream music in Nashville called the custom record business. Custom companies will make a record if the singer pays for it. This is one of the biggest custom companies in Nashville. Caprice will cut a master and press 500 records if you pay Caprice $3,500. But the way a singer is enticed to sign a one-shot recording contract, well, that's open to question.
Caprice is a business, I think, that preys on people's ignorance. I think it's a business that preys on people's hopes and dreams.
Last summer, a Tennessee equity court judge ruled that Caprice was guilty of fraud in signing a Colorado woman to a contract. The judge found that Caprice misled the artist concerning promotion it would put behind her, misled her about royalties she might reasonably expect to earn, and overcharged her exorbitantly for the record she cut. Recently, Caprice Records sent some of its representatives from its Nashville office up to the Twin Cities. Their purpose there was to recruit young Minnesota singers, to convince them that they might have potential to make it in Nashville, to convince them that Caprice Records just might back them up with publicity and promotion, and ultimately to get them to pay $3,600 to come to Nashville to cut a single record. And this is some of the cast of characters you'll meet this week in our story. The star.
It's very difficult to get started in country music now.
The would-be hit singer.
Oh, definitely a con, yeah, without a doubt.
The dissatisfied customer.
Rip-off artists, good at their job, whatever.
The consumer advocate.
Just because you have a record doesn't mean you're a star.
And the president of the record company.
Don't turn that camera on him, I asked you not to.
What, are you happy? Do you think you do, Now, wait a minute here.
Hey.
I'm Mike Walcher with Starmaker Blues.
You don't want to answer our questions? I'm not going to answer any questions about anything.
I've got a TWA halfway around the world, not carry back that special girl carry back.
This is the Coffee House Extempore in Minneapolis. Papa John Kolstad and his fiddler friend Randy are on stage.
No shoes on my feet, there's hot tar on the street. Hey, but I run a mile just to share a smile with you. Oh, you know
This is where Twin Cities musical hopefuls test the limits of their talents, mold their ambition, perfect their performance, and look for that ray of hope that says their dream of making it big just might come true. So when this ad ran in the Minneapolis Tribune Sunday, December 2nd, hundreds of singers hoping for a break responded. Palace Records, a subsidiary label of the Caprice Record Company, was auditioning local talent to record in Nashville. And Caprice bought this commercial that ran on KDHL in Faribault.
Free auditions are being scheduled for artists who sincerely desire to record in Nashville. Country, western, pop, and others will be considered.
Never had no regrets, boys. Not for nothing I've done.
To Dave Swindeman of St. Paul and other singers, the offer was enticing. Dave auditioned with this song.
I just got so tired of looking. That's what's the matter with me.
Swindeman was told he had talent, that his audition had been shipped to Nashville overnight, that Caprice was hot to sign him to a contract if he put $500 down and if he came up with another $3,000 later.
And for that sum of money, they would add an additional $10,000 to $14,000 for promotions.
But Dave Swindeman's no starry-eyed kid. He's been around music for 20 years.
It seems to me like a real ripoff, and especially the people that earnestly have their hearts in making a name for themselves in the music business and getting ripped off by a two-bit outfit.
The next day, photographer Mike Myrendorf and I wired Dave Swindeman with a hidden microphone and a tiny tape recorder. Dave and his wife drove to the Bloomington apartment where Caprice was holding auditions. They came to sign the contract. The tone was positive, upbeat, and pointed to future success and royalties. The voice is that of Caprice representative Roger Culler.
What you want to do in the initial recordings that are for radio promotion is to try to give yourself the best shot. Whether you do your own or others, and then of course as you records you're getting to selling records, releases, you see, then it's of course advantage royalty-wise, whatever you can. But the first thing, of course, is always to give yourself the number one consideration of getting going, you know.
Dave signed this contract to pay $500 down, $3,500 total for 500 records. Moments later, Dave and I went back to the apartment.
Excuse me, Mike Walcher of WCCO-TV. Is Mr. Culler here?
Yes, miss. Just a moment.
Could you get him?
Hold on.
All righty.
Just a minute.
Consultant, talent scout, salesman, call Roger Culler what you will, but he makes a 15% commission on every $3,500 contract he lands.
I don't know anything about music. I know something about business and people and promotion.
You don't know about music?
As far as I know what will sell, but as far as my being an artist or a performer, I am not.
Culler said if Dave's record catches on, Caprice would pay for the second pressing of copies.
All the capital that he needs to give himself the chance that he is approaching is the initial capital to cut the records and start to mail out the records.
Then Dave pressed Culler about the $10,000 to $14,000 in promotion.
Where does that money come from?
Caprice Records is a pretty good, sizable company. They put some money into, as I've told you.
Do they usually put out cash money beyond the $3,466 for that purpose?
Certainly, how else would they do it?
In what manner or form would they be doing that?
In promotion.
And they were supposed to be pushing the record, which they didn't at all.
Debbie Shanky of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, paid Caprice $3,000 to cut her record.
You think he took you?
Yeah.
And a Tennessee judge recently ruled that Caprice made false promises about promotion to a Colorado singer. Quote, Caprice had never spent tens of thousands of dollars promoting any record and had no intention of spending 1 cent. Quoting elsewhere, there is virtually no follow-up promotion by Caprice on its custom releases.
How much money would you suppose it would be spent on one particular artist, supposing that he had a great potential?
All the money will be spent that is required to give that artist the best chance to make himself money and Caprice money.
And Caprice has done this in the past with other particular artists that had great potential.
Culler then showed us the den in the Bloomington apartment where auditions were held. Here, albums of Caprice's two major artists were displayed, and there were photos of the singers Caprice is pushing. Color repeatedly reminded us of Caprice's $15 million lawsuit against 60 Minutes, as he pronounced his company on the up and up.
Yes, and I think they're a successful company. They've been there a long time. They own the building and so on. I guess they're pretty successful. They'll be more successful after they finish this lawsuit with CBS.
Tomorrow at 10, back to Nashville and a confrontation with the president of Caprice.
Don't turn that camera on him. I asked you not to.
I'm Mike Walcher with Starmaker Blues.
The old troubadour himself, Ernie Tubbs, and I'm so afraid of losing you again.
After the record is pressed, mailing copies to 300 unnamed radio stations is all Caprice has to do under its contract. Caprice does mail out those records. Local radio station music directors told me they had seen a few Caprice records, and some had a vague recollection of Caprice's secondary labels. But they all agreed there's virtually no chance an unknown singer on a minor label will get played on radio.
The idea of that, well, they're going to put out these records for you, they're going to publish it, they're going to make a hit for you, I think it's a bunch of hogwash.
Stations are flooded with thousands of records a year. You hear only a few of them.
On the way home, T.G. Shepherd and the Last Cheater's Waltz.
Getting airplay is going to be tough. Real tough.
Dan Burton, program director at WDGY.
I think that the person that thinks that they're going to pay $3,600 and become a country music superstar better think again.
Burton and employees at several other country stations in Minnesota and Wisconsin told me Caprice representatives do telephone occasionally pushing a record. Even if a Caprice custom-produced record were played on radio, you probably couldn't go out and buy it. Caprice's $3,500 deal does not include distribution of records to retail outlets.
Unless it's in the record stores, you're not going to have record sales. And as I understand it, that's where the money's made, in record sales.
Ann Eden and her state of Tennessee consumer staff have investigated several complaints against Caprice. Complaints she says have been settled by the company.
If the record's not available, people can't buy it, and disc jockeys won't play it if people can't buy it. It's sort of a cycle there.
That cycle of no sales prevents an artist from earning royalties. And in fact, Caprice paid $31 in royalties in 1977, according to court records. $31 out of gross earnings of $750,000. Despite the tiny royalty payments, the Caprice contract contains an elaborate royalty plan, and Caprice talent scouts mention royalties a lot when trying to sign a prospect. And just because you pay Caprice doesn't mean you're going to be on the Caprice label. Caprice has Checkmate and 4 other secondary labels: Palace, Chariot, Relco, and Songmate. Most artists who take the $3,500 deal wind up on a secondary label. A Tennessee judge wrote last summer that one of them, Checkmate, is, quote, unknown to the industry. What Caprice charges for a recording session also has been challenged. $3,500 for a session and 500 records. The Tennessee Attorney General looked into the cost and says a fairer price would be $2,000. And Sound 80 Studio in Minneapolis told me you could cut a record there for about $1,000, not counting musicians and pressing the discs. None of this surprises Rose Palermo, the Nashville lawyer who recently won an $8,000 judgment against Caprice. Palermo established a pattern of shaky promises, hints, and come-ons that convinced a Colorado woman Caprice would make her a star.
The salesman said, well, for instance, if your record gets picked on the Record of the Month Club, that's what this is talking about. Well, you see, Caprice has never had a record that's been picked in the Record of the Month Club. That was one of the things that the judge found specifically in the trial. That was all sort of, misleading.
I took these concerns to Don Lewis, who founded Caprice in 1972 and who owns 85% of the stock.
We're from a
Goodbye.
TV station in Minnesota, and
Fine, you
we're
go ahead and
interested
do
in
it.
some questions about
Yeah.
your business and what you do.
I'm sure you are. Don't turn that camera on him. I asked you not to.
What are you happy? Do you think you do? Now wait a minute here.
Hey,
That's a
goodbye,
piece of
all right?
equipment.
I tell you what, I can't have you moved, okay?
You don't want to answer our questions?
I'm not going to answer
Honest
any questions about anything. Okay?
Do you? What do you do with the $3,600 that you make off of demo records?
You talk to my attorney.
told you the answer to it.
You get off, I'll have you off, okay?
All right, sir.
You go back up and you tell anybody anything you want to. And you check us out any way you want to. But I've been told not to give any interviews, and we won't. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Tomorrow at 10, we'll go to an uptight Grand Ole Opry, and I'll report on how touchy some of Nashville is to companies like Caprice. With Starmaker Blues, I'm Mike Walcher. Nashville may be Music City, USA, but it's also small-town America. And it's a town downright put off by anything less than super bright news about the goose that laid the golden egg, the music industry. It's a clannish, cliquish country music haven where who you know often is more important than how well you sing. This is the Grand Ole Opry on a Saturday night. This is the establishment, the summit of success in the country music world. The people who perform here are at the top of their profession. And for a time, it looked like this backstage rehearsal would be the only pictures we'd get of the show.
Why did I leave a plow in the field and look for a job in the town?
The Opry said no pictures inside because performers might demand to be paid. Finally, the Opry public relations man admitted the real reason was that the Opry just did not want to be mentioned in the same series with Caprice Records. We finally got inside, but only after 2 hours of negotiation. The Grand Ole uptight Opry showed us something. Establishment Nashville is very touchy about some companies on the fringes of the music business. Porter Wagoner.
They really give a bad feeling in our industry, which is something we can't help.
I asked Wagoner if a Minnesotan could make it here with one record that the singer paid for.
That's really a wild dream, Mike. That I don't know of that ever happening since I've been in the business for, say, 25 years or a little over, you know. And it just doesn't happen that way. It's not that easy, you know.
I am so far away, even though I keep my own thing going here.
And nobody knows that better than the up-and-coming musicians who play in the dim light of small Nashville nightclubs. Actually, this is a pretty good gig. It's Crystal Gale's backup band playing at Mississippi Whiskers. But it takes time, luck, and talent to get even this far. Time to make contacts, luck to get the right producer to hear you, talent to convince him you can cut it. The rule of thumb, 2 to 5 years minimum to get started.
Some morning when you wake up all alone, just come on.
Debbie Shanky of Eau Claire, Wisconsin thought times would be better for her after she paid Caprice Records to cut her disc. Now she says it was a ripoff. We'll meet Debbie and a Twin Cities native who recently moved to Nashville tomorrow at 10. I'm Mike Walcher with Starmaker Blues. To 19-year-old Debbie Shanky, it's just another day working in the kitchen at Sacred Heart Hospital in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. But Debbie Shanky has a dream that stretches far beyond the hospital kitchen.
I'd like to have some hit songs out, you know, some #1, you know, but I don't want to be so far up there that, you know, it's going to be a big fall if anything happens.
Some morning when you wake up all alone, just come on home to your blue Kentucky girl.
Debbie and her father Merlin practice in the basement.
Just try a little harmony with me on that one.
Do, 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 do.
2 years ago, Debbie Shanky's desire to make it big led her to pay Caprice Records of Nashville $3,000 to cut a single.
They promise so much, you know, about pushing the record and everything, and they don't. It was a stepping stone in my learning the job, the business and everything, and I know what to expect next time, and I hope more people, you know, are wary. It helped me see the business as there are good guys and there are bad guys as well, and to look out for those bad guys, and I hope more people do.
Carl Struck knows how to tell a musical good guy from a bad one. He's a Twin Cities native who moved to Nashville 2.5 months ago.
I think I'm close to having something that's marketable, something that another person can sing that isn't so personal. You know, that other people can sing and it communicates to a broad audience and can get on the radio.
Beautiful women have a way to say goodbye, just to look in their eyes.
Carl has been writing and singing for 10 years now. He used to be music manager at the Coffee House Extempore in Minneapolis. He is a professional, and he maintains a daily routine of writing and practicing.
I know you must travel and be free now. I can see the writing on the wall.
But these two are the tools of Carl Struck's trade. He's a carpenter taking odd jobs. It's a way to make money.
Well, a friend of mine said when he found out I moved down here, he says, glad to hear it. It's, you know, I think it's a wonderful move, but be prepared to eat dirt for a few years.
If you give it a listen, I'll just check back in on
Carl brings his demo tape to as many publishers and producers' offices as he can hustle his way into.
Good seeing you again. Glad you brought the tape back.
You get rejection after rejection after rejection, but you also get critical advice.
This is there's three that I like.
Mr. Struck, would you like this, sir?
All right.
And Carl takes that advice to spots like the Exit Inn, a Nashville club well known for giving breaks to up-and-coming performers. Struck auditions.
After I'd comfort her and make her want to live, sparkle would come to her and then she'd run back to him.
You're selling yourself, you're selling your music, you're selling your talent, you know, and you shouldn't be buying their service. You know, their part of the deal is to develop your talent, to exploit your skills. Your part of the deal is to develop your talent and your skills.
If someone asks you to pay money for any service, as far as if you're a songwriter or a singer, and they're asking you to pay money to produce something for you, then it's not a legitimate deal.
It's been a too long time with no peace of mind.
We end our story the way we started it, with the dream, the fame, the money a Crystal Gayle can command. Very few of the aspiring singers and songwriters we've met this past week will make it. And it's clear to us the path to the musical stars bypasses Caprice and its pay-for-a-record business. With photographer Mike Myrendorf, I'm Mike Walcher with Starmaker Blues.
Breathing like your old self again.
Amazing! Sinex lasted you through the long haul. Oh, more than that. Got me breathing more like my old self again.
Vicks Sinex is long-acting. More than that, it can have you breathing like your old self again.
So much of our news tonight has been on the level of the superpowers, but our final story has a smaller focus, a small town in Quebec that lost 44 of its people in a New Year's Eve fire. Today, the town of Chapay buried 40 of its dead, and Steve Young reports.
11 of the victims of the New Year's Eve fire were copper miners. Outside the mine where they worked, a sign still says in French, "Merry Christmas, Happy New Year." This mining town of 3,200 people is used to living with danger. But this time it came not underground, but at the social hall owned by the mine company at a festive party sponsored by the Lions Club. As the funeral drew closer, people pondered the what-ifs and might-have-beens. Could the blaze have been controlled if someone had had the presence of mind to use a fire hose less than 10 feet from where Christmas decorations were ignited, apparently unintentionally, by a prankster's cigarette lighter. Would 14 people whose bodies were found at a rear door have escaped if a miner on crutches hadn't become stuck in the doorway as the panicked people rushed to get out? For a community that has gone through such suffering, Chappé seemed to be bearing up with a fortitude surprising to outsiders.
People are quite strong here. They're a pioneer type of people, and they can take quite a bit. They're used to having trouble coping with life. It's an isolated community, and you have to fend for yourself quite a bit. And it probably reflects in this tragedy too.
The town pulled together. There were communal dinners at the high school for families of the victims, friends who wanted to show their support, and relatives who poured in from all over the country. Because the bodies were so badly burned, it took 4 days to identify all the victims. A local radio station announced the names and ages.
Yves Lacroix, 20 ans. Michel Larouche, 20 ans.
The affected families asked reporters to let them grieve in private. One man who lost a son and a daughter-in-law said the 5-day wait for the Requiem Mass was agony. It took that long to truck in enough caskets. Today, finally, in the town ice hockey arena, Chappé held a mass funeral for the victims. More than 1,700 relatives attended. So did the Premier of Quebec province, René Lévesque. Many of the mourners had been burned in the fire. Some had to be helped to their seats. The caskets were placed in a double line on either side of the central aisle. Everyone in Chappé was affected by the disaster, either lost a loved one or knew someone who had. Some people were overcome with emotion and had to leave before the end of the Mass. 56 children lost parents. 20 were left without mothers. 26 without fathers. 10 were orphaned. The enormity of the tragedy that struck this tiny town is staggering. Steve Young, CBS News, Chappé, Quebec.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schmidt.